At the beginning of the course, we started to talk about the long history of migration, much of which was necessitated by survival, the drive to explore, and the search for a better life. In this episode, we will focus on irregular migration, based on voluntary and forced migration or displacement, which is the movement of people against their will, or under threat of persecution, or in search of a safer and better life. Most of us are in the privileged position of having a passport, which represents a government vouching for us to other governments in order for us to go from one country to another. Not all passports provide for the same level of mobility, as this graph shows. Many people cannot and do not travel in this way. Their movements are dictated not by holidays and business trips, but political and social upheaval, war and persecution. Worldwide, over 50 million people are forcibly displaced, mainly due to conflict, and this includes what the UNHCR classifies as refugees, asylum seekers, and the internally displaced. The latter, internally displaced people, are those who have been uprooted from their homes and have moved within their country of origin, and make up the bulk of people, amounting to over 30 million. Asylum seekers are those who have crossed state boundaries seeking asylum elsewhere, and are in the process of having their status determined by the UNHCR, or national agencies charged with determining asylum claims. Refugees are those whose asylum claims have been positively determined. The UNHCR and United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine look after almost 17 million refugees around the world. More than half of them live in urban areas, like the ones I work in. Irregular migrants are those deemed to lack legal rights to reside in the country they are currently in. This could be because their visa, a work visa, tourist or otherwise, has lapsed and they overstayed their visa term, or that they entered the country without authorization. In regions where borders are porous, this means of migration is often quite normal, as people cross borders in ways that are not regulated, for seasonal work, daily trading, or along traditional cross-border treks. However, in the West, the border has become a site of demonstrating state sovereignty and resolve. Borders are often imagined as a physical barrier between us and them. Remember when we talked about nationalism and border security in episode 2? But in fact, it is usually just an imaginary line in a forest, along a river, or some other natural waymarker. I work in Malaysia, which has extensive sea borders and borders running through jungles. It's relatively easy to trek through the jungle and cross the Thai-Malaysian border, take a boat and land along the coast, or even fly into Malaysia with a tourist visa. Many countries gain a visa on arrival to boost the tourism industry. Malaysia is usually described as a transit country for refugees from the Southeast Asian region and beyond, from countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. However, it has become a sort of home to over 150,000 registered refugees, as well as many who remain unregistered. Malaysia has become a destination for many refugees, as the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR, has a presence here and operates the largest resettlement program in the world out of a relatively small office in Kuala Lumpur. The UNHCR has had a presence in Malaysia since the 1970s, following the mass exodus of Indo-Chinese refugees from Vietnam and Cambodia, when the world community reacted with a comprehensive action plan that only ended in the mid-1990s. This was a concerted effort to resettle around 250,000 refugees who had temporarily resided in Malaysian refugee camps. Today, Malaysia faces a similar refugee crisis in scope. To date, the UNHCR has registered over 150,000 refugees living in Malaysia. The difference is that the Indo-Chinese refugees were housed in refugee camps mainly along the eastern Malay Peninsula. Today's refugees are so-called urban refugees, who are dispersed across most major cities, living in mostly poorer neighborhoods, working in restaurants as cooks and waitstaff, working in factories and on farms and on construction sites. They work because they have to. The UNHCR does not have the resources to look after refugees and tries to support them to be self-reliant and build up community resilience. We caught up with UNHCR representative Richard Towell in his office to explain how he sees UNHCR's role in Malaysia.
Well, unlike many other parts of the world where governments normally take responsibility for protecting refugees, here it's the opposite. There are no laws in place to protect refugees. Anybody who needs refugee protection who comes here is seen as an illegal migrant. So UNHCR is the default. We step in and provide whatever kind of protection we're able to do in an environment which is not conducive to recognising the legal status of refugees here. Ideally, refugees would be able to go home. That's what refugees want to do and dream about doing, is going back to their homes and cultures. And we hope that in the fullness of time the situation in Myanmar will improve to the point where various ethnic groups will have confidence in going back and voting with their feet to go back and restart lives in their own country. Resettlement is only a relatively small option for people. We have a program here, a very generously funded and supported program, particularly by the United States and by Australia, but that together only accounts for about 15,000 people a year. So those are, in relative terms, quite small programs. Provide is limited. Frankly speaking, we have a relatively small budget for 150,000 people. We're not able to provide people with the level and measure of protection and support that we would like. But the critical feature here is empowerment, to try to identify the more of the vulnerable groups, more exposed in the community than others. After long periods of time here, some communities are quite well established. The Chin community, for example, have been here a long time, and their community structures and resilience and resourcefulness are very well established, whereas other more fragile and what I would perhaps suggest are fractured refugee communities are finding it much more difficult. Those who don't have any size of population here find it much more difficult.
Refugees, meanwhile, focus on getting registered and finding work to survive, a place to stay and stay safe until such a time a solution presents itself to them in the form of resettlement. So what is life like for urban refugees who often live in the less glamorous parts of town, where crime is high and other challenges lurk?